I do feel like this country's much more volatile than people publicly acknowledge.
Oh, yeah.
The senators?
I've met a lot of senators.
It's the densest collection of douchebags and liars and sex freaks I've ever met in my life. We don't want a civil war.
We don't want a civil war.
So how do we avoid that?
So Tucker Carlson recently broached the subject of whether the U.S. is on the verge of a civil war, calling the situation in our political system and our culture volatile, and discussing the ways in which Americans are pitted against each other naturally and what that means going forward. This is in the context of a conversation with Michael Knowles, so let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
But regimes fall. That's the norm in world history. And so we are at a real risk of that if we don't correct some of the degradations in our own regime.
So what would that mean? What degradations need to be corrected in order to forestall revolution?
Well, here's one. The 17th Amendment.
I do feel like this country's much more volatile than people publicly acknowledge.
Oh, yeah. The 17th Amendment creates direct election of senators. Today we say, what would be wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with more democracy. Isn't that good?
Have you met the senators?
I've met a lot of senators.
It's the densest collection of douchebags and liars and sex freaks I've ever met in my life. I mean it.
And just wait till you go to the House.
I worked in television. I feel like there are more normal House members, but the Senate, I mean, there are some exceptions who guys I like and a lot, but only a handful.
I like that. Listen, some of my best friends are senators, but a lot of them.
I was just I'm friends with a couple of them, and I say, well, these guys are freaks, man. They're all freaks. Like John Cornyn, what's his search history? No, I'm serious.
I actually don't know John Cornyn. But
if you had a hold of that guy's iPhone, like what would you find? Any of these people, Ted Cruz?
I love Ted.
Oh my God.
He's a good friend of mine. He is.
Okay, but I can't. But I'm just saying, I'll leave Ted out. I'm not going to attack Ted. I've always liked his wife, but I don't know. Yeah, it's not working.
It's not. And think about how these guys got elected. These guys, it used to be they would be elected by the states, which meant that the states had a role in the government. We're supposed to have states.
Yeah.
We don't really have states.
No, we certainly don't.
They're kind of all vassals for this imperial blob of bureaucracy. But why did we lose that? Antonin Scalia said this to me when I was a student. I got to meet him a couple times, undergrad. And he said, we asked him about states' rights. He said, why are you asking me about states' rights? I'm a Fed. What do I care about states' rights? You got rid of your states' rights in the progressive amendments when you had the direct election of senators. States' rights are done.
And the civil rights.
Well, that's a cop-out, I think, to some extent, because that's an easy way to skirt around the issue that, well, regardless of those precedents that have perverted our constitutional structure and federalism, the 10th Amendment still exists. And this document was originally designed to be one of limited powers that are mostly articulated in Article 1, Section 8. And the states don't, uphold their power under this system whatsoever. They don't nullify the egregious and immoral acts of the federal government, like Jefferson and Madison wanted them to. If you don't believe me on that, read the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions of 1798. But I think that's a cop-out, and Scalia had some bad moments, and not acknowledging the original structural underpinnings of the Constitution is one of those things. And what does it say about Tucker Carlson that the nicest thing he can say about Ted Cruz is something glowing about his wife? I thought that was pretty funny, but indeed, there are a lot of perversions caused us by the 17th Amendment, which takes the states out of the situation. Fisher Ames in the Massachusetts Ratification Convention said that the senators were supposed to be ambassadors of the states. That was their role. The states had a role in this federal system. Now, because of the 17th Amendment, in the name of Wilsonian democracy, they go to Washington and get beholden to national lobbies like the banks and Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and the military-industrial complex, and Big Pharma and Big Food and Big Telecom and Big Tech, instead of actually being influenced by their home constituencies. They rarely return to their home constituencies now because their real constituencies are the banks, Big Pharma, and the military-industrial complex.
Movement killed it.
Civil rights movement killed it. The implementation of this. I mean, every government office has a civil rights division now. It's like Christopher Caldwell, an excellent guest on your show,
wonderful,
and a great writer,
wonderful guy.
His book, Age of Entitlement, basically proves this thesis that there's a parallel constitution, which is in tension with the old constitution. So you do have a crisis of regime that's coming up. And
how does that play out?
I hope peacefully. I really hope. I think it can play out peacefully. Some people on the right, they'll say, I want a civil war. You heard this a lot during BLM and COVID. So I want a civil war. On the left and the right, they say, I don't want a civil war. If there's a civil war, I'm going to have to like shoot my cousins. Do you know what you're saying? I want a civil war. Do you know what a civil war is like? So, Dante is one of my favorite writers. Civil war ruined his life. He said it's like the worst thing that can happen because the whole point of a political community is to secure peace and order for the common good so that we can flourish.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's things that I disagree with Knowles on this, but on this I agree. I hope that liberty can be brought to fruition peacefully. But I do know, looking back into history, that there are times where men are willing to pick up arms and fight to the death for their liberties. That is, their right under the Jeffersonian and Lockean creed that governments exist only to protect life, liberty, and property. And going beyond that means that they've lost their authority and can be displaced. But I do hope that happens peacefully. I'm not a pacifist. I do believe in defensive actions against aggression that my state is causing, but I hope that we are led to a brighter future peacefully. So on this, I think I mostly agree with them.
And when you crack that, I mean, the whole political community is just an extension of a family. It's
the Spanish Civil War ended 85 years ago, and you go to Spain now, they're still mad about it. Mm-hmm. It still divides that country.
Yes.
Greece, same way.
Isn't that so weird? We have to be angry that the communists were defeated. The Bolsheviks who were killing priests and
Spain is a uniquely sad country. It's a wonderful country and wonderful people, but oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was demonic, obviously.
Obviously.
They began by shooting a statue of Jesus, so that was kind of a sign. But and every evil person in the United States joined. And
yes, what is the Abraham Lincoln Brigade?
Abraham Lincoln Brigades, exactly.
I remember when I was a kid, I heard that some guy died. He was in the Abraham Lincoln. I said, it's the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. I looked into it. I said, he was a communist.
It was Stalinist.
Yes.
It was Stalinist, like the entire American left was.
Well, Abraham Lincoln was closely aligned was used as a symbol by many of the early communists, even in the United States. If you look at, there's a picture from a classical communist convention, I think in the 30s or 20s, that has a big bust of Lincoln sitting there. This was an infatuation of Karl Marx. Actually, Karl Marx wrote to Lincoln when he was in office. There's not really much evidence that Lincoln, knew of Marx's works and wrote back to him or anything like that. But there is on record a letter that Marx wrote to Lincoln congratulating him on election. And, he has been linked in this way as a symbol to many of the communist guerrilla groups and things like that. Just a word for thought.
Honest.
This is why, talk about the changes in the 60s into the 70s, this is why they had to get Nixon. They never forgave Richard Nixon because he got Alger Hiss. Richard Nixon knew that there were actual communists in the government at the highest levels of the State Department helping to found the United Nations. And he knew it, and he got him dead. And he believed Whittaker Chambers, and he got him dead to rights. They never forgave him for it.
That's totally true. And they made up this whole fake scandal and took out the most popular president in American history.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't even sell all of it the right way. Under McCarthy, they call it McCarthyism, but McCarthy unveiled the knowledge that there were more people that were prevalent within the government at the highest levels of the State Department and the Treasury Department, including Lee Duncan, also Harry Dexter White. He was, I think, the Undersecretary of the Treasury, or maybe Secretary of the Treasury. He was actually divulged to be a Soviet spy. We know a lot about this because of the disclosures under the Venona Papers, which vindicate in many ways a lot of the things that McCarthy was saying. And McCarthy wasn't out for a witch hunt against individual communist members, only those that worked in the federal government. This was treason at the highest levels, and Alger Hiss, one of the most notable ones, certainly so, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, etc. But there were more. Lachlan Curry, another example. The head and architect of the OSS, the entity that eventually became the CIA, was a Soviet agent working in the United States. Just other things that you're not told in history class.
No, I know. It's very but anyway, I guess the point is a civil war has our own civil war. It's only finally kind of cooling down.
And we're relitigating it.
Well, because Reconstruction never really ended.
Right.
So let's just humiliate the South and turn its cities into slums, which we've done. So yeah, no, it's all, we don't want a civil war.
We don't want a civil war.
So how do we avoid that?
Well, I think we need strong leadership, which we are getting in Trump. We actually do have an executive on the right who's willing to do things. This has been a big problem for the right because of ideologies that were essentially liberal, where the right said, you need to elect us so that we do nothing. That was their explicit pitch. If you elect me, I won't do anything because I want to principally, with great dignity and integrity and principles, give away all the power. Because if I ever do anything, then the minute the Democrats come into office, they might do all the things they've been doing for 50 years.
All right, well, this I have to dispose with. We have totally different conceptions on what Trump is doing. Instead of doing nothing, he's doing the progressive agenda just slower than maybe some of the progressives would in terms of the wars. He's still fighting the same wars. Foreign policy hasn't been transformed much at all. He hasn't shut down the Ukraine war. He's bankrolling the genocide in Gaza. We're flirting with regime change in Venezuela now, by the way. And he launched an aggressive war of choice against Iran. In terms of spending, he's spending more than the Democrats. This term will end up spending more than the Biden presidency. That's been true going back many presidents. It's not a bipartisan thing. He's expanded the surveillance state, incorporated Palantir into the surveillance state that is creating a database to link individual data between the NSA and other government entities. He's drag people that are good on spending, like Thomas Massie, through the dirt. All this is why Michael Malice says conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. Trump is no different, but in optics. His optics are different. His delivery method is different. His style and his swagger are certainly different, but the policies aren't manifesting differently. So I don't agree that there's anything transformational about this presidency, essentially.
So we can't have that.
It was National Review Republicanism. Yeah. I was there for that.
I mean, Buckley at least. Buckley defended McCarthy, for goodness sakes.
He did. He absolutely did.
This is
then he turned on him, but yeah.
At a certain point, it was politically incorrect. But you think of those early days, Brent Bozell, who Ghost wrote Conscience of a Conservative, an amazing book.
Well, Brent Bozell meant it. Right. So he was exiled.
Yeah.
Because he really meant it. He was mentally ill. Okay.
And he went over after the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, I know.
Raised
his family in Franco's Spain.
Yeah.
No, I know. He meant it.
But look, there's always been this hodgepodge on the right of disparate groups, as you well know, that don't totally make sense together. And so you have the traditional conservatives. Well, the fusionist coalition was the traditional conservatives and the libertarians and some warhawk Democrats who wanted to take down the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And I think it made sense at the time.
And the neocons, I don't know if he's afraid to say that word, but the Buckley, Irving neocons are part of that too, ripping asunder the old right. Murray Rothbard wrote a great book on this called The Betrayal of the American Right, because Buckley said, well, libertarians are mostly right, but there's this existential threat in the face of the Soviet Union that we have to create a totalitarian system within our own shores, totalitarian bureaucracy within our own shores. He literally wrote that. If you don't believe that, search in it. But the neocons took over the right. They still remain ostensibly in power despite turning against them optically. You still see prominent neocons like Mike Huckabee and Marco Rubio steering foreign policy right now.
A common enemy in the Soviet Union.
I was there for that.
Of course. And
I read commentary every month growing up. We got it at home. Yes, we did.
You don't have any copies around here anymore. I don't know where.
I was raised on commentary. I mean, we're like this Protestant family getting the official publication of the American Jewish Committee. I read every issue. Arch Puddington, Ruth Vissa, or whatever. I think they all hate me now, but whatever. I grew up reading that.
One of my favorite lines recently was from Norman Podhoretz, who said, they said, "You're the founder of neoconservatism." He said, no. I'm so old that I'm now a paleo neoconservative. I'm too old for that. And this is, there's the paleos and the neos and the libertarians and the traditionalists and the this and the, obscure political monikers are the right-wing version of gender pronouns.
No, it's totally
Everyone's got his own thing. And this is,
okay, but there are clear differences between the old right, the ones that you call isolationist right now, the Pat Buchanans that, some people on the right likened to being a fanatic of Hamas, a Hamas supporter, and the neocons that want to bomb every country under the sun no matter what, defaulting to proxy wars and regime change operations. That's a stark difference. I mean, this isn't likened to just using a different individualistic pronoun to describe you. This is a whole different mindset in terms of foreign policy, and that separates the old right, the people like Robert Taft and Pat Buchanan, with the new right, the people like Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham and John McCain and George Bush and all those scoundrels that have dug, America into an early grave over this empire building nonsense.
What I love about Trump is Trump an ideologue?
No.
What kind of ism does Trump ascribe to?
Trumpism.
Trump, that's what he ascribes to. Americanism, I guess. I don't know. This is a man who's brought together a disparate coalition of like weirdo, crunchy hippies and bow tie wearing traditionalists and libertarians and Silicon Valley tech futurists. And like, it's the craziest coalition ever.
Yes.
And he has brought them together and won the popular vote for the first time in 20 years as a Republican. And it's an amazing thing to see in action because he's got a vision and he's just a force of nature.
All right, I mostly agree with the coalition that Trump has built. It has likened some unfamiliar people into the same kind of coalition to support a particular presidential candidate, but we are seeing that coalition die down, or at least schisms between it over the handling of Ukraine and Israel and the Epstein files and spending and Palantir and lots of other issues revolving around this. It is a loosely knit coalition, if that, but it is degrading. His approval ratings are suffering. You're seeing the dissidents and many of the libertarians that did support him. I'm a libertarian. I didn't support him, though, fall out of that coalition, and rightly so, I think. But I don't necessarily think that it's a commendable thing that he doesn't have a philosophy and he doesn't have principles. I would like him to believe in the philosophies of libertarianism, of individual rights, of true non-interventionism, and that doesn't characterize how Trump is acting, despite some of the rhetoric, which was good in terms of foreign policy. I would like him to learn about Austrian economics and why this debt and artificially manipulated interest rates are destructive in the long term for America, and that why a trade war is a bad idea for Americans, including workers here, domestic workers, and for consumers, why all these things are unnecessary to embrace. So I wish Trump actually has read a book before. I wish he was intellectually curious. He's not. He's a total pragmatist that seems to be steered in the direction of the people that he surrounds himself with. And that's not to take culpability away from him, because ultimately he has the decisions, but who is he placing close to him? It's people like Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz and Mike Huckabee and all these vile neocons, after we were supposed to believe that he had learned his lesson from the first term and putting Pompeo and John Bolton beside him. I don't think he has learned anything. So there's some things in this I agree with Michael and some things I don't. He's much more glowing toward Trump, obviously so, but I think there's a lot of problems with the Trump presidency here. And, whether the U.S. is on the verge of a civil war, I don't think so. I think that we learned everything we know about that prospect in 2020, the COVID lockdown regime, and how little of resistance there was toward that. It built up more and more over time. This became, unfeasible and unpalatable for the regime to enforce over time. But there was very little resistance to that, not nearly the kind of resistance you saw in ways that were conceptualized by, say, the Stamp Act in 1765, where American patriots, burnt stamp officials in effigy, refused to, allow the dissemination of the paper for the taxation, used intimidation tactics against law enforcement. We haven't seen that in the U.S. We haven't seen opposition like we saw in the 1850s to the Fugitive Slave Acts, etc. We're not on the verge of civil war. I think that's a good thing, but I would like to see political change pan out without violence. That's my sincere goal. And I think, trying to induce a mass awakening is part of, I think, my place in this whole thing. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Do you agree with Tucker and Michael Knowles on this? Is the U.S. on the verge of the Civil War? What is going to come next? And do you agree with their conceptions of the Trump administration? Leave me a comment down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Appreciate this interview. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And as a gift to you, I will give you access to all of my videos on YouTube before they go live to the general public. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.